Hey guys, what you've heard about federal government jobs could be untrue. There are still some misconceptions and myths that are being spread around by people even today. Let's talk about it. The first myth is that all resumes are being scanned by a computer or by software. While this may be true for some agencies, it is not for all of them. And even the ones that use computer software to scan for keywords through your resume, they still have an HR clerk that reviews the resume before going to the referred pile. Now, a real person will look at the resume, but that real person has hundreds of pages to look through because it's not just one resume. There can easily be 100 or 200, 300 people applying for the same job announcement. So in this case, they're looking through it, but they could be using Control F in order to find certain keywords. And this is one of the reasons why it's so important to make sure your resume is meeting the specifications in the qualifications section. And to go above that, OPM has a handbook for job series. And what you really want to do is you want to make sure whatever job series you're targeting, whether it's 0300, 0200, look through that handbook and make sure that your resume matches most of the words in that handbook. The second myth is a person cannot get a government job if they have a criminal background. And this, again, is untrue. Even if you have a criminal background, you can compete for the majority of jobs. As long as you are considered one of the highest rated candidates, you will make it into the refer pile, and then you would make it into the interview request portion. However, there is an exception. If you were a person convicted of treason, then that conviction holds a lifelong ban for federal government jobs. But the good news is the last time somebody was actually convicted of treason in this country was in 1952. And I believe it was in Japan, regarding some activities that were conducted during World War II. So if you're watching this, you haven't been convicted of treason. The third myth is that you need a security clearance in order to be able to compete or in order to have a federal government job. And this is false as well. The majority of jobs on USAjobs in the federal government, they do not require a clearance. Now, there are some departments that are more likely to want you to have a clearance. And off the top of my head, this could be like DOD, the Department of Defense, or DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, and of course FBI, CIA, organizations like that. But if you're looking at applying to the Department of Labor, Department of Housing, Department of Energy, a lot of these type of agencies will not require a security clearance. Now, just because a security clearance isn't required, that doesn't mean you will not have a background check. You will definitely have a background check. And that'll be to determine your suitability to hold a federal government job. And usually what's included with this is a credit check. So they'll check to make sure you're paying your bills and that your credit looks decent. They'll also check your criminal background. And once again, this doesn't mean that if you have one, you'll be disqualified. You can have a misdemeanor on there. And in some cases, you can have a felony on there and still be able to compete and hold a federal government job. Understand there's multiple levels of clearances and public trust backgrounds when it comes to a federal government job. If you're considering clearances, they have the confidential, they have the secret clearance, the top secret clearance, and public trust is something different. There's also low, medium, and high risk positions. So how comprehensive that background check is will depend upon the level of risk associated with that job announcement. And you can find out before you even apply. If you look through a job announcement, you will see exactly the level of risk, or you will see if there's a clearance requirement. Now, it can be a pain to get a clearance. Sometimes you have to fill out a 100-page document and they look through the last 8 or 10 years of your life. So if you want to avoid this extra burden of paperwork, then perhaps you could filter your search to not include positions that require clearances. The fourth myth is you have to know somebody in order to get into the federal government. Once again, this is false. I personally didn't know anybody. When I started applying, when I started getting refers and interviewed, and finally when I received multiple job offers, I did not know one single person on the inside. And if you don't know anyone, you can still get best qualified, referred, interviewed, and a job offer. And how do you do this? Well, it comes down to your resume. The resume is all about demonstrating your knowledge, skills, and abilities and showing how your experience lines up with the qualification for that job announcement. And because it's such an integral part of getting the federal government job, I made a small course that takes individuals step by step to help them build up a strong resume. Link is in the description below. Now, you've probably witnessed, or you will witness, people that are able to get a federal government job easier because they knew somebody. And as with every facet of life, when you know someone, things are easier. The networking still matters, whether it's private sector or whether it's government. But the way the federal government system is designed, the intent is not for you to have to know somebody. You can compete on your own merit. The fifth myth is that your resume should not be any longer than 2 or 3 pages. This is also false. Now, in the private sector, it is often said that your resume shouldn't be longer than 1 or 2 pages. The difference in the federal government is that the HR clerk reviewing your resume, they cannot assume anything about your experience. For example, if you were an operation manager, obviously between me and you, we know that you've communicated. You had to communicate with people because you're a manager. But the HR clerk cannot just look at the title operation manager and just assume this individual must have been communicating with people. So if you're applying for a job and on that job announcement it says written communication and oral communication, you have to specify that exactly in your resume. You have to make it clear that you communicated with certain individuals. You really have to spell it out clearly for them. Now in the private sector, more assumptions can be made. Also, another thing to consider, there are some job announcements out there that specifically say your resume cannot be longer than 5 pages. Or they'll say it this way: any resume that is over 5 pages will not be read. It'll say that clearly in the announcement, and that is why it's so important to read the job announcement. Do not just assume that all the job announcements are a copy and paste job and go straight to the apply button. Look through there and it'll tell you whether certain documents are required. Many job announcements say that you need to turn in your performance appraisal, or if you don't turn it in, you need to explain why you don't have a performance appraisal. So there are certain important documentations and tasks you might need to do, and if you're just skimming through the job announcement, you'll miss it. And if you miss it, you disqualify yourself. And basically, you wasted a lot of time applying. But when it comes to 5 or 6 pages being the limit to a resume, I would say that only applies to maybe 10 or 15% of the job announcements that are out there. Outside of that, it's not uncommon to see an 8-page or a 10-page resume, or even longer than that. The resume is basically a demonstration that you possess the experience necessary for that job. So if you have experience but it does not pertain to the job, it is not in your best interest to include that, only to make the resume that much longer. Well, that wraps up my video on You've Been Lied To About Federal Government Jobs. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments, please leave those down below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.